Thank you. Good morning. Wow, that was a lovely introduction. Thank you, Sarah. We are thinking about systems with Bytesize. So my name is Andrea Magnorsky. I'm a programmer and the creator of Bytesize Architecture Sessions. And you can see there's some of my experience. And the reason I'm showing that off is to tell you and to kind of share with you the fact that we share either the experience of being in a big or a small company, of being in corporate or a startup-like environments. And there is a common thread of what is really, really hard, what fails really. Many of these problems that you find everywhere can be traced back to the lack of a shared mental model. So today, as you're here, we're going to go through this agenda. We're going to understand, try to learn why is it that sharing knowledge is so hard. How do we currently share that knowledge? Then we're going to kind of learn about Bytesize Architecture Session by like an overview and a couple of industry examples. And then you, the people sitting here, are going to ask me loads of questions. And then we're going to answer them, which is going to be great. So you might be thinking, Andrea, I just had my coffee, and you're telling me that everything is a problem because we don't have this shared mental model. How are you so sure? And I am sure about that because you ship what is in your programmer's brains. If the people that encode the software system don't know what the system should do or why, the consequences can be grim. And I'm sure we've all experienced this, right? It doesn't help that as an industry, we're kind of like obsessed with how we do things because it's a lot more fun, really. Isn't it like, it's like there's a new shiny thing and we're like, ooh, look at that. Wouldn't that fix my problem that I have? And it probably does, but also probably doesn't. Interestingly, I came up with this, and I'm quoting myself here, which I find hilarious. So I quote myself here in 2021, and you probably were like, what? She knows she said that, what? So I said this in around 2021. But it turns out that some other guy that is actually quite smart about this stuff, called Alberto Brandolini, who is the famous creator of event storming. Parenthesis, event storming is this thing that you do a bunch of stickies on the wall and everyone's together, and by that you discover the domain. Obviously, go and read more about this, but we don't have time to do another talk on that. But Alberto Brandolini said this, which is a very, very similar thing. And I'm mentioning here for two reasons. First, I thought I should kind of say, hey, this guy said it first. The other thing that is interesting is that he also tries to address knowledge sharing. And we both came up with the same conclusion. So, either we're both right or something else. Anyway, I promised you that we were going to talk about things that, we already know it's kind of hard to share knowledge, right? You agree? I'm going to make it work. Come on. Is it hard? It's hard. Anyone disagrees? Very courageous, very nice. Okay, but it turns out that steady state of sharing knowledge is hard, but it turns out that things never stay the same. It's really annoying, right? You have added difficulties. For example, you have a team and you work really good, but the team changes. And that means that new person, you need to teach them stuff, or someone that knew all the stuff that we all ask questions to, if they leave, well, that's really awkward. And the other thing that's weird and hard in sharing knowledge is that, let's say you have to coordinate between two teams. Now you have this massive feedback loop to actually get answers. Add another team, the feedback loop is horrible. As you add teams to trying to share knowledge, this gets harder. The other thing that's difficult is that you have conflicting long-term plans. So you had some plan, it's like, oh, we're going to do this first, and then we're going to solve all those bugs that we wanted to fix and we were waiting. But something changes because businesses do that all the time. And now that change, like the way the knowledge about the change ripples through your team and other teams is like a wave. It doesn't get to everyone at the same time, even if you were on a meeting hearing about it or whatever, right? Because that's just not how it works. So people that care more about that change will be knowing about it quicker than you. So on the left-hand side, you have everything to do with time that makes sharing knowledge difficult. But there is another thing that makes our life harder when it comes to knowledge sharing, which is to do with role-dependent variance. And you have this nice Venn diagram there. The idea is that let's say you're a programmer and you're on the Venn diagram on the set on the left. If you're an engineering manager, maybe you're on the right. Maybe if you're a designer or a QA or whatever, the way you think about sharing knowledge depends on the role you have. Things that are important to you as a programmer might not be the same that if you're a designer, that if you're a project manager. And by the way, even if your team doesn't have these roles happen. So you might not have the title, but you might have the role. And that shapes your thinking. And so when you're sharing knowledge, you are just not sharing all the right bits, right? Cool. So knowledge sharing is hard, which kind of sucks. But how do we do it? So there's this really cool diagram I made to show kind of how we do some some sharing of knowledge. And this goes from something that is more verbal to written. Writing something down tends to make you consider what is it that you're writing sometimes. We've seen the internet. Sometimes that doesn't really happen. But you also have protocol and no protocol. So for example, documentation, right? Documentation it always goes like super well. You write it down, it's perfect, right? Yeah, it always goes super well. Also, it's always up to date and such. So I like to kind of make a point about documentation because the whole point of doing this graph is to try to make you think about the feedback loops that you get on all these different types of knowledge sharing methods, right? So with documentation, the problem is that it's actually pretty hard to get good feedback, isn't it? So if you're in a chat, it's kind of easier. Imagine I'm talking to you. Hi, friend, and you're like, oh, hi. I can see your face. I can see that you're saying, I don't know, right? Feedback, it's immediate. It might not be high feedback, as in, I don't know what he's actually thinking, but I have some signals, where with the documentation, I don't. So Bytesize Architecture Sessions falls here in the workshop side of things, because it's a workshop. Now, the thing that I wanted to tell you about here is this Bytesize Architecture Session is bite-sized because it's supposed to be small. I say architecture because I want you to think about your systems. It's not like scary architecture or whatever. And sessions, consider the S at the end, is because you're supposed to have, instead of a big thingy, you have many small thingies. And you will notice that it says workshop there. It's kind of on the workshop side of things. And in a workshop, you work, right? Everyone that attends one of these is supposed to be working. It's not an observation thing. It's not like nothing like that. You are going there and you're going to do some work. But it's a little bit of work, so it's nice. So Bytesize Architecture Sessions is a workshop format. And this generic T that you see here is any modeling tool that you want to use. So it could be C4, it could be sequence diagrams, it could be any type of modeling or diagramming thing that you want to use. Bytesize is a collection of highly collaborative meetings that, I'm repeating, has a format, takes 45 to 60 minutes each. It's recurrent, and you can, the good thing about this is you can have a series of sessions to achieve some goal. A goal can be something like, I want my team to be more cohesive in their understanding or something like that. And you might be wondering, why is it that I'm kind of pushing people to diagram things or to model things? And that is because, as Donella Meadows in her excellent book about systems said, systems just happen all at once. Unfortunately, they don't happen sequentially. Like this would be much nicer for all of us and easier in our brains to sequence it out. Especially as programmers, we like things to, things nice little this instruction, this instruction, this instruction. But unfortunately, systems just do not do that. And Unfortunately, the way we tend to share knowledge, in the previous diagram, we talk, which is a sequential thing. And so you want to give it some tools so that doesn't happen. Ultimately, we want to understand the system as it is right now and know enough about it to keep it alive. Basically, it's essential to share knowledge to build systems, right? So at this point, you might be right, okay, can I see what a session looks like? So this is the format of the session. Before you actually run a session, and I did say it was like 45 to 60 minutes, you need to prep. And by prep, I mean you need to make sure that you invite the right people and that they are ready to actually take part in this. For example, let's say you want to use C4 or some other modeling technique, and they can't do it if they don't know how to C4. Why would you put people in a meeting that don't know what they're supposed to do? That would be unfair, right? And you need to invite the right people, right? So on the session itself, right, on the day of the session and the hour of the session, I'm sure you've been to meetings before, and people turn. Anybody been to a meeting? They are great, aren't they? So the problem with meetings, the problem with meetings sometimes is that you're there in the meeting, and you turn up, and you were in 55 meetings before this meeting. You're kind of still thinking about the previous meeting because they were talking about a thing that you care about. But you need to be in this meeting, and you need to do some work, right? So this work that you need to do is about doing something quite small. So this is where you start off with the session goal. You do this in a couple of minutes, and you decide together what is it that you're doing. Let's say you do something like a high-level diagram of the system. If you're starting with like, we don't know what we're doing, right? The thing that you do next is called Alone Together, and I put it in bold because it's really cool. And it's this thing at the heart of the Bytesize Sessions where you, individually, you're all together in the same room, and there's like 8 to 10 of you, not like loads. So there's 8 to 10 of you, maybe 11 or 12 if you really want to push it. And you're together, virtually or physically, and you do the goal that you decided on. Let's say a high-level system context diagram, right? Once the timer has elapsed for this little drawing, you explain. It's like, oh, I did this, and then I think it sends the message to here. I'm not really sure about this bit. I think we get the message from this third party called lolcats or something. And then after I finish, try to do not very, very long, then the next person do it, the next person do it. So this might seem a little bit strange, but the good thing about this is that at the point we're starting to do this, you have multiple things happening. The first one is I had to draw something. So if I came from the previous meeting thinking about whatever it is, I had to draw something that made some sense, right? Because we don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing. And also you have to, as you do it, you realize that you don't remember certain things, that you want to know how this other thing works, which is good. What happens afterwards is like you hear other people. This trains your active listening skills, which we're not really good at as programmers, generally. And the other thing is like now I know that in that room, these different people think in ways that I hadn't considered. The other thing that happens is they mention stuff I completely forgot, which is pretty cool. So after this happens, which is actually a really cool bit of the session, you have the biggest part of this meeting, which lasts about 30 minutes, which is called consensus. Now, that should be a hint of what happens. What happened next? So what happens here is that together, you do the same session goal that you decided with all the new perspectives, and you try to put it all together. Surprisingly, this takes a lot longer than you're on your own, which is pretty good. And finally, you have the summary. The summary is like a few minutes at nearly the end of the session, where you do a mini retro. One thing I would mention here is that this session runs strict on timers. So you're not done, that's okay. Keep the questions. You have another one in a couple of weeks, right? So you might be wondering, okay, I mean, that sounds kind of a little bit exciting. This is how someone felt, how someone experienced this session. And I think it's really representative. When I try to explain how this works, I think if you ever played a cooperative tabletop board game, it's kind of that feeling, right? Because you're trying to work together to address an issue rather than you're working against each other, which I think is a much better way to make something, to build something, right? So this is, what is it? And we went through what is a Bytesize session, more or less how it feels. Why should you do it? Okay, I'm gonna drink some water because I'm thirsty, so you'll read that. Thank you. Right, so, you know, I kind of said a few times, so you want to have this homogeneous understanding of your system. And that's because it enables introspection, and also you're building consensus together. Don't be fooled by saying that you're building consensus. This doesn't mean rainbows and ponies. I mean, sometimes you do get it, but consensus means you find some common ground, or you build it, right? The system needs to make sense. And if it doesn't, it will do whatever sense it makes, right? The system does what it does. So might as well try to find the meanings, make sense of things. The second thing here is, this is an enabling format. Because you had this time alone together, and then the consensus building, you had this time to think on your own. I've been approached by neurodivergent people multiple times after sessions to let me know that this is the most effective workshop they've ever attended, which I think is a really nice green flag for collaboration. Finally, this is an emergent behavior, and I think is an excellent sign for a systems tool. It creates design tools. And what I mean by that is this. Imagine you had 5, 6 sessions, and you maybe created 2 or 3 models which generated diagrams, right? So if you need to, at that point, design a new feature, suddenly you have these diagrams you already all know to be correct because you agreed on them. And that means that you need to do this big work. You lean on those. And then, you know, because you did this big work and you use those diagrams, guess what? The design tools keep building up. So a super nice emergent behavior. Ultimately, what you really want with something like Bytesize, and actually many other collaborative tools, is to build an architecture practice in a safe way. Out of 2 options. Option 1, you only do kind of diagrams and modeling when it's a high pressure, you know, we need to get this right type scenario. That's option A. Option B, you do this stuff kind of often and you get to learn little by little how to model. What's a good decision? What's a bad decision? Which one would you choose? Well, thank you. I mean, some people would like to choose A. We keep choosing A, actually, right? So I think it's better if we choose B, if we choose this architecture practice in a safe way. So, yeah, it's more stressful. So, you know, that's nice, right? It's a bit more adrenaline. Woo. Anyway, so we're going to go through an industry example of what does the first Bytesize session. I kind of just told you what the format is like, which is grand, but maybe you want to see actually what happens. So this is a session that ran in a broadcasting organization in the UK. And the scenario here was that there was, out of the whole team, kind of half of them were new people, and they obviously didn't know the system. They've been in this team for a couple of months. Team leadership kind of wanted to do something to get them kind of more onboarded or something. So before the session, what did we do? We invited, we kind of decided who needed to be invited, right? And we were like, oh, who should it be? And what I suggested here was that we invite people that are active during stand-up. Active being a very important word. People that go to stand-up to listen in probably shouldn't be there, at least for this. And we can fight about it later. Then, I remember I mentioned you shouldn't put people in a workshop that don't know the tool they're going to be using. So the team lead took the responsibility to teach them the C4 model. So the session started. So this happened online. We used an online collaboration tool. It could have easily happened in person. And we decided we were going to do C4 with a high-level system context diagram. If you don't know what this is, please grab me afterwards, because otherwise this goes on for quite much longer time. So we had already kind of decided, OK, we're going to do the context diagram of the system as is. As you can see, these are pictures of the attendees. They were feeling a little bit, apprehensive. Cat especially is always being a bit mysterious or whatever. So, what you're going to do. But don't worry, it gets better. So then we did Alone Together. We set up a timer for 3 minutes. And when the timer elapsed, each attendee explained their model. You might be looking at this diagram and thinking, well, those are kind of strange diagrams. And those are the actual diagrams those people did, right? So I blurred them out, and obviously the avatars are not actually people, right? But but I want to bring your attention to that, and I know they're blurry, but notice how different those are to each other, right? Not just in color, but in shape, which is quite interesting. And this happens every single time, right? Imagine these people all through a slightly different system, actually, which is fun. So. Consensus. So the team drew part of the system, and they were so sad. They were like, oh no, please let us keep going. The timer elapsed, and they were like, no, but listen, we just need like 5 more minutes. And I was like, no, the timer's done. And so we're gonna move on. And they didn't understand why, but we're gonna get slash. So they did a summary. Right? And this is where we went over, how did this feel? What did we get? So they said they learned a lot. And what they meant by that is by doing this whole thing, they figured out all these questions that are really important and specific. It enabled them to have the right conversations. Right? This is what Bytesize is supposed to be about, and any other collaboration tool as well. It's all about enabling the right conversation, building your mental models to be better. Now, if you want to know more about exactly how to run this, you can go to bytesizearchitecturesessions.com. I know it's a really misleading name, but that is the name. So I'm going to give you a little interlude. This is a picture of Kia, a really, really cool New Zealand parrot, which is what you need right now, right? Right, so I just showed you one Bytesize session. And you can kind of maybe at this point imagine how it feels, what you get, But what can you do with something that is quite simple, which is, I did want it to be simple but powerful. What can you do with a bunch of these? Cool, I also forgot how to drink water, very nice. So what if you need to collaborate with 3 teams at the same time? I mean, generally this takes quite a while, right? If you're trying to get 3 teams to kind of align on not just what a problem is, which is actually a quite difficult problem, people can say, oh yeah, the thing, and that's the problem. We need to improve the pipeline. No worries. But when you get to the details, aligning on the problem is hard. Never mind trying to get to align on the solution, right? Because then it gets even more exciting. So in here, we had to do some major improvements to the video pipeline for a TV channel in the UK. When I was planning this, I thought we'll need about maybe 5 sessions to do this, right? And we do the first couple in trying to get where the system is right now, because you should never go and try to fix something if you don't know what it is, because that would be, a bad idea. So first, find out where you are. Then I thought, we'll do ideal. What would be the best solution that we could do? And finally do what we should actually do, right? That was the plan. Seems kind of simple, 2 sessions, maybe 1 session. But what happened next? Dun, dun, dun. Right, so you know the format now, right? You've been here for like a few minutes. You are experts in Bytesize Sessions now. So the Bytesize session ran as it does, goal. We had the goal first when we said we're going to draw the system context diagram for the 3 teams interacting as they are. Then we did the alone together bit. Then we did the consensus. And then we did, the retro, somewhere at the end. So the interesting things that happen here is that, I grouped the systems for each team into blobs so that this talk made some sense, because otherwise you wouldn't know who owned what or whatever. But this is actually how those systems interacted. You can probably see, even if you had to kind of guess, that this is quite convoluted, right? Maybe more convoluted than it needs to be. An interesting thing about the sessions running is that, for example, say I am in team 2, right? When I did this Bytesize session thing, I was trying to, I could kind of know how to interact with team 1 and team 3, but it got blurry when it came to everything outside what my systems touched. And this is quite obvious when you think about it. But this example happened to all of us, right? The other interesting thing that happened because of that is that we all had really specific questions about how that bit that we didn't know about worked. It wasn't like, oh, tell me about everything about your system. It was like, can I know exactly how team 1 sends this strange thing, this yellow thing to team 3? It was specific questions, which is what you want. Surprisingly, we actually managed to grow the whole thing in one go. We did go for 90 minutes, though. Then we had a second Bytesize session. So we already saved one session, so we saved a little bit of time. So we're in the second session. This happened a couple of weeks later. This was all about trying to find an ideal solution to this problem, right? We needed to shave off some improvements, and I know I'm not being extremely specific because we don't have so much time, but don't worry. So we drew this after doing Bytesize. Remember, goal, alone together, consensus, summary. We did all of that, and we drew this, right? It looks a little bit simpler even at a glance than before, like something like that. Before, after, very nice. So in here, the thing that happened was really strange. People were trying to go for ideal solution. And in the middle of that, 2 of the people came up with like a super outlandish thing. But those crazy ideas they had gave us some kind of room to really start discussing what we were trying to do. And actually, it made us realize, oh, wait a minute, we can kind of nearly agree on something. Like we could do this thing, which is not excellent, but it's not too bad. And this actually could just work. And this all happened in consensus. Again, this all happened because we had specific questions. So at that point, we actually had agreed on a solution. What happened next is that we started doing some diagrams. This happened offline after the session, right? We did some ADRs, and we had to do some extra kind of tying of knots of actually what happened in the actual contracts, the JSON files and XML, and it was all really cool. If you want to know more details about this, there's a book. Actually, this whole case study is explained in a lot more detail in chapter 17. The other really cool thing about this book is that, I mentioned event storming, I mentioned some other techniques, and Nick Tune's book is super, super good about this. I feel quite honored to be, for Bytesize Sessions to be there. If you're really into collaborative software design, Bytesize Sessions is also mentioned here. So you can look at that. It's actually amazing. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is all good. I can just go home, go not home because I mean, you can do this at home if you want. I mean, I'm not going to judge you. But you can go to work tomorrow or Monday or whatever, go like, hey, let's do some Bytesize session, and that will be great. You can actually totally do that. I'm going to give you this advice of 2 things you definitely need. You need, if you're looking at this format, you can probably imagine you need to be able to talk to the people. Very nice. You need to talk to the people that you're going to be doing this with. Imagine if you don't feel safe. How good is this going to go? So if you have psychological safety issues, this might work, but it would be better if you enable that first. The other thing you need for this to be most effective is if you turn up somewhere to a workshop like this and you think, I got nothing to learn, guess what? You probably won't, right? You need to be wanting to learn something to learn it. You need to be curious. You need to have a growth mindset. So, in closing, if you've never heard of Russ Ackoff and you like systems, I invite you to watch this amazing TED Talk. The link is there. I also shared slides on my website already. You can just go to roundcrisis.com and find this link. But one of the key quotes that he says there that I really like is that a system is not the sum of its parts. It's their interactions. And one thing that we tend to forget is that the way us communicating is an essential part of that interactions in the system, right? So it's like this whole thing is about building your systems. So key takeaways. Knowledge sharing is essential to systems building. If you use a diverse set of tools to enable, you can use a diverse set of tools to have effective and efficient knowledge sharing. And key takeaway, try Bytesize session. Let me know how it went. Thank you very much.